Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist news and discussion at the good old US of A. I am Charles York. Here with me is a driving Darth Calhoun, who is driving, Victor Smith, and William Stout. We have
Thank you,
quite.
Charles. Thank you, Charles. And I wanted to address this off the top. Sorry to hijack here, but last week was the day that we released the podcast on Mondays, and we would like the Monarchist of America would like to profusely apologize to every single Gold Star family for not mentioning or commemorating Memorial Day at all on last week's podcast. It was unacceptable, and there is no excuse. We would like to apologize for not commemorating Memorial Day last week. And I'll hand it back to Charles, who will run down the top.
Okay. Well, in addition to doing Memorial Week this week, we're kind of tying that into the the anniversary of the death of Kaiser Wilhelm II, which happens at the time of recording tomorrow, the 4th of June, although for you YouTube people, that will have been in the far future. The far past. I can time. And then we'll cover some food dish or something that's going on in England right now. I don't know, some sort of cherry jubilee, an event that didn't happen, but the people who weren't killed deserved it in China, and bringing up the Johnny Depp trial because Pirates of the Caribbean is the only movie series of his that I've really watched. So, with all that out of the way, we can talk about, I guess, a little bit of the legacy of Kaiser Wilhelm, and I guess maybe we should focus, even though this is more of a Armistice Day thing, focus more, well, not on all people who died in the service in general, but specifically, I guess, on those from all nations who died in World War One. And I guess everyone from that time, which in so many ways helped set up this time for better or worse.
Anyway, if I can start.
Yeah, of course.
Wilhelm is a sore subject among some monarchists. I've heard him jokingly be referred to as the Che Guevara of monarchism, because he is both a monarch that is loved and loathed in our community, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, well, the reason why Wilhelm is loathed a lot in our communities is honestly because of Anglo propaganda about it. Like up until the day that the war started, the New York Times was calling Kaiser Wilhelm II the Peace Kaiser before they called him the Hun. So it really calls into doubt the smearing of his character back in the
I mean, from
legendary temper didn't help that reputation. For those of you who didn't know, Kaiser Wilhelm II was known for being a little bit of a short fuse, but he did his best a lot of times to make sure that didn't affect his abilities as a ruler.
I mean, when you're having to be the world leader of one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen, that's a lot of stress for any man.
Yes, I can imagine it was a lot of stress. And I was going to bring up a point before Will started talking, and I discovered that I was muted, so if you'll indulge me. Death is a very sad thing. And death is something that, as a certain book once said, death is but the next great adventure. We can either go to heaven or purgatory on the way to heaven, or go to hell. And let us pray that we all go to heaven. And for these soldiers that we commemorated last Monday, their death came suddenly For some, it came, well, for all it came suddenly, but for some, it came swiftly. For some, or for actually all, they were unnaturally unprepared for death. And I think this solemn commemoration, I don't really want to call it a holiday, but as it were, this solemn commemoration, it harkens me back to a time I was in high school and I had written a poem comparing one of the hurricanes, I think it would have been Katrina at that point, with the arrival of a casket of a serviceman at Dover Air Force Base. And I talked about how in all the chaos of basically the rush of a hurricane or the guns of battle, there is a sort of stillness and serenity in the areas sort of around that. You know, the eye of the hurricane is the calm that is in the dead center of the hurricane, and of course the if you ever get the chance to go to Dover Air Force Base for one of these ceremonies, I have never been, but it is a very moving and very touching thing for the family to welcome their fallen serviceman home after his untimely death. And they say that Kaiser Wilhelm was a peacetime Kaiser, probably because he was forcibly deposed after the end of World War I. And tying this in very, very poorly here, Kaiser Wilhelm lost his empire, and I imagine it gave him a lot of grief, but not nearly the amount of grief that our Gold Star families go through each and every single year at around this time of year, which is why I felt personally mortified that we had forgotten to mention Memorial Day last week on our podcast. And this brings up a good opportunity for us to sort of reflect anew on the sacrifices made by our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and Space Force people. I am not going to call them guardians. But like those families, just as those families sacrifice a lot so that their servicemen can go out there and be safe and feel loved, just so that Kaiser Wilhelm loved Germany, just so that Kaiser Karl loved Austria. It was, I can imagine, a very painful moment for both of them losing their kingdoms. It was, I can imagine, and we know how Kaiser Karl reacted to it. I am, perhaps Darth can help us out here, but I think Kaiser Wilhelm may have felt a similar pain or sadness when he
When
lost.
Well,
when he crossed the border between Belgium and the Netherlands, seeking refuge with to Queen Wilhelma, he contemplated, retrospected in his memoirs that he retrospected if it was the right thing for the German people that he abdicated, or if he should have actually gone back to Berlin and put down the dissidents. But he wasn't sure about that, and it haunted him for the rest of his life. What was truly best for Germany, because he saw the violence that happened in the Weimar period. So it's really a horse of peace, because then that's getting into the alternate history sphere, which like and whataboutisms. What about if he instead marched a few regiments to Berlin and reinforced his authority? What if he abdicated for his son instead, which that's what he tried to do. Because he also thought that would be a good solution for his people as well. But it's still we don't know what would have happened.
The
Of
misery
course,
and sadness
of
that
course, and we don't know what would have happened, but it's not exact. But the whole point that I'm trying to make here is that I pray that all of us love our nation as much as Kaiser Karl and Kaiser Wilhelm loved theirs. Just just as the Gold Star families, who I cannot imagine the amount of hurt, the amount of grief they go through every single day of their lives, because their serviceman gave his life in defense of what he held dear. He gave his life for us, really, for our right to speak freely and to feel how we feel, and our we even if we may not like the particular direction of the nation or what have you, we cannot sit here and say that we are not grateful to those that died for it, because they signed up to serve and they knew that they were going perhaps to die. And 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 I think that this commemoration that we do as a nation is very much.
Sorry, that's veteran day that
wind in. But anyway, back to the subject of soldiers. Imagine the grief that all those soldiers felt, not the ones that died, but the ones that came back from World War One to a nation that no longer existed. Imagine all those soldiers that, went to war, suffered 4 years in the trenches, and came back to the Empire of Germany no longer existing, came back to a broken nation with a defunct economy where they couldn't find jobs or support their families. Imagine the chaos, the madness, and the fact that you risked your life and lost countless of relatives, friends, and brothers and had basically nothing to show for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Just to be
I think there is a certain honor in going to war for the survival of your nation. I think there is a certain inherent honor in just the act of doing that.
Well,
There
yeah.
is one thing everyone can agree with who is a monarchist, and that is World War One was perhaps the greatest mistake humanity had ever made.
And to tie that back to um, Kaiser Wilhelm, because you know how George V, King George V, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Tsar Nicholas were all cousins. And I mean, there's the letters that were shared between them, trying to avoid. They're trying to get this war, and it's they weren't calling each other by their titles. It was just like Nicky and stuff.
Willie,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. I mean that whole thing. Well, I mean, just the whole situation that led up to the war, and how nobody wanted it. It got out of control, and there were a lot of these, almost warhawk people and all these terrible calamities that eventually led to it.
There
It
a
it
German techno band that compiled all of Tsar Nicholas and Kaiser Wilhelm's letters together and used it to make a song to commemorate basically the calm before the storm, the period of time before the war broke out.
I mean it's and I mean it's in a certain sense you could say it's it's not fair that those people who tried so hard to prevent the war were ultimately undone by it. I mean, uh, Kaiser Wilhelm, he had to go into exile, and Tsar Nicholas was, murdered. Blessed Emperor Karl, who, well, his father just, well, not father, his uncle Franz Joseph died, and then he was exiled, and then really the only major monarchy that got out of it was Great Britain, but I mean at that point Britain as a kingdom, Britain was more the uh, essentially crowned republic it is today. So
And
um,
the
yeah,
following war that was a direct consequence of World War One, whether some people would dispute it or not, I don't know how anyone could possibly dispute the idea that World War Two wasn't a direct consequence of World War One. But the following war saw the destruction of the Italian monarchy, the Romanian monarchy, the Bulgarian monarchy, and
the
countless
Yugoslav monarchy.
restoration movements were crushed beneath the heel of the Third Reich or the Soviet Union and during the war and during the aftermath.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's that's and that's the thing that that notion that all these people died, and at first glance it doesn't sound like. I mean, at first glance, you may just say, well, clearly they died for nothing. Um, but at the end of the day, they gave their lives, and many of them were probably scared and would rather have not died. But at the end of the day, a lot of them gave their lives freely for their country, and maybe, and I hope that maybe just maybe their deaths will good will come out of their depths in the sense that maybe people won't try to have this sort of thing happen anymore, but also that in a sense that these people could be a rallying cry for positive change in the future, as opposed to the negative changes that resulted from the end of the Great War itself, like the collapse of the Kaiserreich and the collapse of basically all Central Europe and Eastern Europe, and everything west of, besides Scandinavia, everything west of the Rhine was essentially a mess. Well, I'll let Dar speak because he hasn't in a minute.
I've been busy. the that war, like, it's true that none of the world leaders, like the heads of states, wanted that war. Maybe, well, except for Woodrow Wilson, he definitely wanted that war, even if he made big boasts that he didn't. Um, uh, it was a war of the bankers essentially, because the reason why that war started was because the Germans were out competing everybody in Europe, every single European economy, and it was a threat to the previous hegemony of Britain, primarily Britain, but also you could kind of say tacitly French in there too. And after the War of 1870, or the Franco-Prussian War for other people, um, uh, it it really was a show that if they didn't act against Germany, that Germany was going to, just by sheer productive might, dominate over Europe. And it was really a conspiracy against the Kaiser, specifically the German emperor, but Austro the Austrian Empire was just caught in the middle of it due to circumstances. Um, there was a plot to also dethrone the Habsburgs. That was more by Freemasonic lodges, high level Freemasons within the Austrian Empire, and the Kingdom of Serbia, and most of the members of Black Hands were members of the Masonic lodges, the famous men that partook in the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So it's sad that so many young men, the best stock of Europe, had to die on those battlefields for a war that was ultimately about money and secret societies and liberals hating on traditional institutions like the monarchies of Europe.
I appreciate the fact that you bring up how much of a shock the Franco-Prussian War is, because most of us looking back on wars between France and Germany, we tend to laugh and mock at France, but we forget the fact that the Franco-Prussian War was considered a geopolitical upset at the time, and that nobody thought the German Confederation would actually win that war. Everyone thought it was
Well,
a war for Napoleon III.
well, I mean, up to that point, Napoleon III had many successes under his belt. He was able to pacify the Italian liberal rebellions and save the Pope. Ironically, it's kind of funny how the liberal monarchy saves the Pope. I forget exactly what year that happened, but it was during the Italian Wars of Unification. Um, and he had put in the Habsburgs in Mexico with Emperor Maximilian, which unfortunately also failed, but not really due to his actions, but due to American financing of Mexican liberals and Mexican revolutionaries.
And basically
So,
robbed Mexico its only opportunity to have a stable government.
Oh no, we did that multiple times.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying we haven't done it repeatedly. And then we ask, gee, why is everyone south of our border trying to come north? Maybe if
the
You
Monroe
don't
Doctrine
say.
and its consequences for mankind have been a disaster.
we stopped intentionally sabotaging all of our neighbors, we wouldn't have such issues with mass immigration and illegal immigration.
Hey,
Yeah,
look,
but
there's
that's
this guy who's
expecting
trying to.
politicians to think more in terms
They
of
give
like
us.
generations instead of election cycles.
I mean, hey, look, there's this Catholic politician in Peru who's enforcing Catholic social teaching and it's having great effects. Let's kill him, guys. Although it's never been confirmed that the American embassy actually had a hand in the assassination of that guy whose name I can't remember. But
No, but we had
Hey,
no problem installing a
I
military
think I might have
junta in
a relic.
Chile.
I think I might have a relic of the guy somewhere. I'd have to find it, but I'm not gonna go look now.
yeah, well, I mean,
but yeah, like this is getting beyond the point. America's hand is always tied. In fact, America's hand was tied in World War I since 1914, even if on paper we weren't at war with Germany until 1917. When the British cut the telephone lines between Berlin and Washington in the first days of the war, there's no communication between Central Europe and the United States. It's not like they had satellites back then, or you had to do the old telegram line that was literally long cables on the ocean floor between nations, which could easily be cut. And then the British hold on to a telegram by Zimmerman, which was a simple proposal. It wasn't an official state sanctioned proposal to the Mexican government for them to reclaim their American states if America went to war with Germany, which everybody kind of knew that America was going to go onto the side of the Entente because all the major Wall Street financiers were heavily lending out credit to the British and French government. Essentially, 1915 onwards, almost all the British war funding came from Wall Street. Just put that in perspective. So if the British would have lost the war, that means that they would have had to default on all that debt that they had to American financiers, which means a crippling blow to American financial might on the world stage. That's why Woodrow Wilson was so keen on getting us into the war at any opportunity that he could. And then he used Lusitania, and then he had on top of that the Zimmerman telegram to bolster the anti-German resentment within the heavily propagandized American Anglo population.
Yeah. And that's had its consequences, because until that point, German was the second most common language in the United States, just because of the massive numbers of Germans that were over here. I can't remember if it was Frankenmuth, but somewhere in Michigan, I believe it was Michigan. The anti-German the anti-German phobia was so intense that this woman broke into the local high school where the textbooks were in German, and then she just burned them all. Like just took, and it even went so far as to be absolutely silly. Like sauerkraut became Liberty cabbage, which in hindsight is hilarious, but it kind of reflects
Oh, and by
this.
the way, don't forget freedom fries instead of French fries.
Well, I don't think that was this war, but no, but yeah, I mean, in hindsight, huh?
I said we're talking about the Germans, not the frogs here.
Yeah.
Don't leave those awful people.
Well, France,
I
the
technically
lawful
French
target of
fries
any
are
joke since
frozen anyway.
1789.
Yeah,
Yep.
technically French
Also, that's my German side coming out of me too. I just read Ernst Junger's Storm of Steel, and he just absolutely he loathes the French, but he admires the British.
But imagine a Midwest where there still was a native-speaking German majority. For
Well,
one,
minority, but still
well,
very large minority.
yeah. But for one, me taking German on Duolingo would actually have purpose. Two, the food would probably be much better.
Yeah, I can attest to that, being from a German clan. And also one of the worst things was also the de-Germanization of most of the surnames in America. Of course, with literally, what was it, a third of the white population being German, a third of the names were all these amazing German surnames, and then they all disappear after World War One because, well, people were getting tarred and feathered for even mentioning the Germans without even speaking German. The anti-German hysteria led to murders, led to concentration camps within America, led to gang violence against Germans.
Pretty much
And
the same
And of
thing.
course, the other issue is that everybody with a Vaughn in their last name had the Vaughn chopped off.
Well,
well, that's what happened when they first came to the United States too. Even if they kept like the rest of their German surname. My family falls into that, which I tacitly introduced the von into my signature into some documents I sign because I just simply loathe the American anti-aristocracy laws, and it's pretty hard for them to enforce it. So
But
yeah. Also, my family resisted we resisted changing our names, our surname. We still kept it in the original German because yeah, we were more loyal to the Kaiser than we were to the Stars and Stripes. And in my heart, I feel I've readopted that.
yeah, we've always had that issue with the U.S. We had that issue with the Japanese during the Second World War. We had that issue with Italian immigrants when the Irish came over. Being Irish is considered one of the cool heritages in the U.S., but when the Irish first came over to the U.S., we basically saw them as a little more than animals, and that's
Not at first, not at first. We are remembering there were a bunch of Irish that came before the American Revolution.
Well,
right.
yeah, but we're talking about the waves of Irish immigration that came afterwards, like with the potato famine and
Yes,
whatnot.
yes, I'm well aware. I just wanted to make that fully clear.
Well, I mean, even then,
Yeah, and that,
the Irish probably wouldn't have been liked all that much because the Irish were Catholic, and you know how
Back
Not
washed.
mine.
then
um,
the
the in uh,
Hmm.
in Montana, there's a city named Butte, Montana, and it has a statue of Mary upon one of the mountains. And it's called Our Lady of the Mountains because the main source of income in Butte were the mines, the copper mines there, and it was almost exclusively made up of Irishmen because the Irish were just forced into all these loathsome jobs that no Anglo American would ever dare touch. So Irish would just die in these horrendous jobs that would take them by the hundreds. Um, it is really sad that was the reality, but
kind
that's
of
what happened.
like
Now that sounds like something that would be on Mike Rowe's Dirtiest Job series. Something
well,
that
Oh,
pays a lot of money, but nobody really wants to do it.
if I
Well, it
may,
didn't even pay a lot of
the
money
only
back
dif-
then.
if I may, we still kind of do that today. The only difference is that today immigrants are protected by labor laws. But let's think about it. Most of the jobs that people first start with when they come to this country are jobs that basically Americans, natural born Americans, think they're too high and mighty to do.
Like the military, it's so sad. The amounts of native born Americans joining the military is disproportionately less than the amount of immigrants that join the U.S. military these days, which it is a way to get your citizenship, so they're being smart by doing that. But still, it is more one of the worst jobs to have here in the United
Oh, and
States,
of
and I can
course,
attest to this firsthand.
How much
oh,
of
of
the
course. And you
fighting?
see a lot of the migrant workers, and yes, I am using the actual definition of migrant worker appropriately here. The farmers that go up and farm and then they go back. That has to be really hard on your family because I know for a fact that, and this isn't just talking about those migrants, this is talking about all immigrants. Some of them, if they have families that are still over in their native homelands, they send some of their paycheck back home. And I don't know how much they would have to send back home, but
I also have experience from this firsthand with working construction. Um, Typically, I would ask them, and some guys would say, oh, they send like a couple $100 through Western Digital down. Some of them say it's like literally three-quarters of their income, so they're only keeping like a fraction of what they make to pay for what they need in the United States, like their basic housing and and food and everything else they're sending down to their families. And I had a guy from Nicaragua, one from Mexico, one from Colombia.
You're
That,
against
that
immigration because you don't think we should be supporting foreign-born citizens? Okay, buddy, I'm against immigration because I don't think we should be exploiting them as cheap labor.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, the
and that's not and that's not
it,
and, that, and that's not even cheap. American, let's take this up to the corporation level. Ford doesn't make their cars here. They make them in Mexico where it's cheaper. And
well, another problem with migrant workers too is they are actually like devaluing the currency in their own native lands by sending a ton of American currency down to where they are. It is devalue. It is making the prices rise because they're introducing more money into their local money supplies in their native countries. So it doesn't help their families in the long term. Like it's a very short term approach to making money as well. Like the better thing would also like if America made like a empire of all the Americas and had under one currency model and actually tried to develop these countries like not necessarily to our modern standards, but like to a probably say like even to like a 1960s standard, which a lot of these countries do not have even to this day. Mostly only in their capital cities do they actually do that.
I think what we should do in Latin America is we should start developing these countries, help them fix their corruption, help them fix all their social and political problems to a point where they're like pre like 1980s China. That way they can just rapidly industrialize. We can move all of our industrial capacity out of the red giant and move them back into the US and into these more friendly, more ideologically aligned, and basically more allied nations in Central and South America, and we could form an entire Western economic bloc, basically recreate the Monroe Doctrine as a sort of economic.
Well, that was your mic's cutting out a little bit, but yeah, I can't hear. No, I mean that was the whole Monroe Doctrine was the problem in the first place. I mean, us trying to meddle in Latin American affairs where we originally destabilized them by sending in Freemasons uh and promoting Protestantism and doing this, that, and the other
Well,
is
the
what.
purpose of the Monroe Doctrine was to guarantee the independence of any nation that declared its independence in the Americas. That was the original purpose of the
Despite
doctrine, but then we started using it to exploit our sphere of influence because that was the big thing that everyone was doing during the Victorian era.
Well, yeah, but I mean the Latin American countries were better off under the Spanish than they were here. I mean,
I
you
wouldn't say that. The
well, no,
Spanish
no, no. I mean,
very
okay, so
powerful
the
government.
the indigenous population, at least in a lot of areas, from my admittedly limited understanding, they always sided with the Spanish because it was the native white born, like that second level on the encomienda system or whatever they called it. Those were essentially the oligarchs who were
they're called the encomienda.
encomienda. The second level on that, which was
And the
the
second level of the encomienda were called the mestizos.
no, the mestizos were the mixed race. No, I'm talking. Okay, so you had the top, which were the Spanish-born aristocracy that was sent over to govern the colonies, and then the you had the white aristocracy, the sons of those white aristocracy that were born in the colonies. They were one level lower, and I heard the reason for that, and I'm not sure, was because the Spanish wanted to prevent a corrupt colonial oligarchy from taking root that would overthrow Spanish rule. Kind of like what happened with the U.S. and also happened with the Spanish colonies. So the Spanish were right to try to curtail that, even if they were ultimately unsuccessful. But anyways, but no, I mean the natives by and large, at least from my understanding, supported the the Spanish crown, and then it was after the Spanish were booted out that a lot of the repression of the natives actually happened. Like when the Mexican government um
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay. So like the repression of the what was it called? The mission system, the ranches, the mission ranches, which had a different name, I think. In Mexico, they were done away with when the Mexicans took over when the Mexican state was established, and all of this had negative effects on the native population. I mean, the Spanish. I mean, our history of our common perception that the Spanish were just waging a brutal war against the Indians constantly isn't true because the Indian population is still there. I mean, it's not like the U.S. where and in Canada where the Indians are essentially a tiny minority, and we basically and we basically killed the rest, or they died of disease, which was sort of unpreventable. But no, I mean the Spanish generally, once they came in, they took over the joint, they set down the missionaries, and then they said, okay, as long as you're Catholic and you have allegiance to the King of Spain, we good here. And then that was how it worked.
I disagree. First of all, we need to understand what the encomienda was, and it was a transplant of feudalism into the New World. It was the same estate system as was seen in Europe. Now, the thing
Yeah.
about the Spanish colonial model is Spain saw itself as a successor of Rome, and they based their colonial model off that idea. And Spain, actually, the way they governed their colonies, intentionally hurt them in the long run because it prevented them from being properly developed in any large degree, unlike the British model, which saw massive amounts of middle class investment and growth, which led to the healthy growth and success of their colonies. But the problem with Spain was that most of their cities were underdeveloped, most of the land belonged directly to the state, and a lot of their economic policies resulted in large quantities of wealth being forced out of the colonies back into Spain, and this basically led to the colonies remaining impoverished when compared to the colonies of other countries. And this basically resulted in much of the issues we see in Latin America, with much of Latin America being underdeveloped and such, compared to the US at the time, because Spain used their colonies as an ATM rather than investing in it in any usual or suitable degree. Also, the reason that there are more Native American populations in Central and Latin America is because a majority of larger Native American civilizations existed in these regions. There weren't an Aztec empire or an Incan empire or even the Mayan civilizations in British North America or French North America, primarily because these civilizations either collapsed after the Hopewell and Adenan civilizations collapsed, or because the smallpox epidemics had ravaged the region prior to English settlement, and that the Native American populations never had a chance to recover. When the Pilgrims arrived, they found countless empty Native American villages because smallpox had wiped them out 10 years prior, and basically everyone but 1/10 of the Native Americans that were there before was gone.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at the same time, but the same thing happens to eventually would happen to all the ones in the South. But on the economic point, Argentina and Brazil and I think Chile actually still, despite everything, still had rapidly developing economies. And but of course, most of their economies were based off of export, and then their
Portugal.
markets kind of collapsed, so they couldn't build a bunch of dreadnoughts and point them at each other anymore.
Well,
But
Portugal, hold up. Brazil was Portugal, and
yeah,
Brazil
I know, but
And to be fair for the Brazilians, the Portuguese monarchy fled to Brazil, left part of itself there to form its own independent monarchy, and so Brazil kind of had a head start.
Well, still, but Argentina and Chile didn't, especially considering that most of what is now Argentina and Chile were even unsettled at independence. Like technically, Spanish control didn't extend to the south that it that it does now with Argentinians and the Chileans. But I mean, my point is with the Spanish system is that there was retention in a lot of areas of the local nobility. Um, they were just now subservient to the King of Spain, so they were essentially, it was an importation of the feudal system. And I'm not saying that the Spanish should have just extracted all the gold, but ultimately this led to the preservation of the local populace there and whatever elements of their culture were compatible with Catholicism. And um, even if they weren't necessarily as developed as we were, that they still were better off in the spiritual sense than they were with our Calvinistic influence, like with when some of the Puritans did find the Indians that were left. Given their belief in double predestination, they just sort of were like, okay, the metaphorical equivalent of that. Not all of them. There was one who tried to translate I guess, the King James Bible into their uh, language, but by the time he was done, there was no one left to read it because the rest of the Puritans had killed them all. Yeah.
I'm not saying for a second that America and the British colonizing man were saints, but I would definitely say that Spanish wasn't that much better than we were. Our economic model was definitely more successful for the people who came here and at the detriment of the people who were already living here. But Spain basically just threw people into the new world and then milked them dry along with everyone else that was already living there. To me, the best colonizer was probably France, because France went out of their way to painstaking degrees to work with their natives and the natives that lived there. The legacy of Quebec, French Quebec, I think is very strong.
Well, no, I mean, but you have to understand that the Spanish didn't just leave the people there to rot. I mean, there were universities. I mean, the universities of a lot of these Latin American places were built well prior to independence. The Spanish did build missionary churches, and they built all these things, and they did make an investment. Now, once again, I'm not saying that Spanish governance was perfect. I mean, just like I'm not saying Spanish governance of itself, of Spain proper, was ever perfect. But the fact that the Spanish, how do I put this? I mean, kind of ran out of something to say when I just hate that when you're starting to speak and then you get ahead of yourself and you have no idea what you're going to say. But anyways,
All right. Well, it'll probably come back to you at some point, and we can perhaps go back to it. But does anyone else have anything more to say on this topic? Because I know there's.
Yeah,
well,
we
we
kind of.
got. How do we get from Memorial Day to here? Oh, okay. Hold on. We this is another trope of Monarchist Minute where we trace our way back. Let's see. So we were talking about the Spanish and then the French colonial systems, and then we got to talking about that when we talked about the Germans in America, and we talked about that when we were talking about the Kaiser, and then we were talking about Memorial Day. And do we
We have
want to talk about D-Day or?
we have
Uh,
the
Because
Jubilee.
that's the 6th.
Right, we're talking about the Jubilee next, I think.
yeah.
But since it's like a closer related topic to Memorial Day and all that, do we want to talk about D-Day now?
I think we can wait a week.
Yeah, we can wait a while. We need to get ourselves back on course.
All right. Well, 50 minutes in, and the title description that I put in for the timestamps I'm keeping is already no good. All right. Well, so we're talking about Le Dimond Jubilee.
Dimond Jubilee.
All right. Well, uh, this is her 70th year, right? 70?
Yeah.
70 years. Wow. Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne, uh, somewhat questionably legitimately for 70 years, which is I mean quite an accomplishment.
Charles,
Um
stopping a Jacobite long enough for us to celebrate this monumental achievement of monarchy.
well, I
Yes,
mean
we
Louis the
wish.
14th was on the throne for longer.
But we as an organization would like to send our heartfelt congratulations to Her Majesty the Queen on her reign, and long may it continue.
Yeah.
God save the Queen.
Yeah. I mean it's I think we talked about this a little bit before, but and this is sort of indirectly going to become a downer, but just to see the comparison. So 1952, when she took over the throne, there was still a British Empire. I mean, technically, there still is a British Empire, but now it's a lot. No, nobody. London can't just overrule Ottawa or was it Melbourne's the capital of Australia? Anyways,
No. Melbourne isn't the capital. The capital is Canberra, I think it's called.
oh, it's that made up city that's halfway between Melbourne and Sydney that they just made up because they didn't want to. Anyways, well, I mean, I guess technically all the cities are made up, but Any, anyways, good times. But anyways, so yeah, no, I mean, it's not like London can just directly overrule it or whatnot. But um, the fact remains that y-
To be,
that there's, huh?
to be fair for Queen Elizabeth, the process of decolonization was already beginning before she came to the throne because India had already gained its independence by then, so the dominoes were already in effect.
Yeah, India and then Pakistan, and then they started shooting at each other, which must have made the Commonwealth meetings a little awkward because I think they're both in the Commonwealth. I'm not sure though. But anyways, no, I mean
Commonwealth nations even have formal meetings?
I there's
Yes, there
Commonwealth
is. Yes, there
games.
is. I believe an annual meeting where they basically glad hand and not exactly talk about anything serious.
Oh, so it's a family reunion.
The British, the Indian Prime Minister, and the Pakistani Prime Minister stare down each other from across the table while everyone else is having joyful and lovely
I'm not
conversation.
sure if Pakistan's a member of the Commonwealth of Nations.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I mean, I don't know. I mean, somebody could probably just double check that, but I mean, but no, I mean, like Britain. I mean, on the positive notes, what's happened during her reign? I mean, a lot of the post-war terrible architecture that's still being built in a lot of areas. Some of that's being replaced by more traditional styles of architecture. I think isn't Prince Charles actually didn't he help design this village that was made with completely like more stylized and I guess more classically inspired architecture.
Yes,
Um,
he did. And another thing about the village, it is 100% walkable and or accessible with public transportation because Prince Charles is a king.
well, he will be.
He,
Uh,
eventually, the queen's not dead yet.
yeah, he's the he may be as close as he'll ever get. Because the joke. How like when did those
Oh,
jokes first
Pakistan.
start?
Okay, Pakistan is part of the Commonwealth.
Okay, like when did those jokes that the Queen will live forever actually really begin in earnest? Because I think I've heard those as far back as I can remember that she's just going to be around.
I think I've heard them as far back as I can remember too. But honestly, I think they've been going on. I think I was still in high school when I first started seeing those. I don't know. But the Queen is as old as my great grandmother. That much I do know. And my great grandmother also is a pretty spry old lady. But the point remains is the Queen is ancient. She drove ambulances during the Second World War.
She's like, yeah, she. I mean, she's probably. I think she's the last like. I mean, not like. I don't know if technically like vet would be veteran would be the thing because I mean I don't know if are nurses counted as are nurses counted as vets? But anyways, or ambulance drivers? I don't know. Anyways, but she's the
The
last
Corps.
person who took a huh?
She ha- she was in the civilian corps. She has medals. She
Oh
has a uniform from the period. So she was obviously given some kind of, what's the word I want to look for? Decoration, commendation for services to her father and country.
yeah. I mean, uh, but I mean, no. I mean the whole I mean, I think she would be the last World War II person who actively took part in World War II. The last one of those to be a head of state. Which is which is pretty impressive. I mean, not
And those people that say the British monarchy is ran by fascists can eat a shoe because of that.
the British monarchy is.
Course, we should probably also say CBS did a show last night at time of recording, which was they did a show commemorating the Platinum Jubilee on Thursday, which is last night at the time of recording, where they talked about her reign and etc. And they spent a good amount of time basically saying how, oh, the monarchy has moved forward and progressed because apparently they lauded Harry marrying Meghan Markle as this milestone achievement, just as Prince William marrying Kate as a milestone achievement.
I, I mean,
No, a milestone achievement would be Queen in one of her last acts as monarch before dying of old age, walking into Parliament, disbanding it, and immediately fixing everything currently wrong with the British government before allowing them to return to session and then dying peacefully in her sleep.
Well,
you
well, if
wouldn't
she
harm a
wins,
little old lady, would you?
well,
No.
well, sorry to poo-poo on your little parade there, Will, but if the Queen ends Parliament and tries to fix the government, there would be new elections. Those MPs would have to be re-elected.
Yeah. The
Britain,
fact
The
that
new Parliament would probably take their power away.
well, I mean, this is the thing, right? I mean, Queen Elizabeth really the fact that she's allowed this sort of thing over her reign, and I don't want to be critical of Queen Elizabeth II because I'm sure she's a nice person, but the fact is that this sort of direct, I mean, the royal assent thing would now be gone. I think the royal assent thing is gone. That Parliament no longer actually has to get approval from the Queen to do that. I mean, previously the monarchs just were like check, 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 because we don't have because unlike the British, I mean, we have a veto system where the president can veto laws Congress passes. It's different in the UK because the Queen has to or had to assent to the laws, which functionally is the same thing, but in terms of the actual symbolism, it's different because in the American system, which we have, Congress has the authority to write laws, and the president is stopping it. Whereas the Queen is the one where the secular law, emanates from, and she has to approve anyone who's trying to make a law, right? So,
And just to add on here, Congress has the right in our Constitution to override a presidential veto.
which Parliament shouldn't be able to do.
A 2/3 vote, though.
Yeah, I mean it's so, but I mean the fact that I believe that was actually taken away under her reign recently, not like last couple of years, but last decade. And I mean that's and maybe even, or it was either that or actually her power to dissolve Parliament itself was just taken away. And you see,
The
that's huh,
I don't think the power to dissolve Parliament
huh.
during the whole
Your mic, sorry, your mic's being funny again.
power to dissolve Parliament was taken away because during the whole Brexit hocus pocus, what's his name? Who's the fat guy that's
Boris Johnson.
yeah, Boris Johnson asked the Queen to dissolve Parliament during the whole Brexit fiasco. And I think royal assent is basically a ceremonial thing now. Now, the Queen still meets with the Prime Minister on a weekly basis, which basically gives her the opportunity to yell at him and berate him behind closed doors as much as she pleases. And, part of me deep down inside likes to laugh and think about the idea of little old Queen Elizabeth cursing out Boris Johnson behind a closed door in Buckingham Palace. But
You should probably mention Boris Johnson is a natural born American citizen that renounced his citizenship. Go on.
that is weird to think about. But again, part of me deep down gets a great feeling of joy to think about the idea of the Queen yelling at Boris Johnson from behind closed doors.
But I mean, the thing is that it's still the extent of the Queen influencing the government shouldn't, or how the kingdom is run shouldn't just be her wielding soft power, right? That monarchs are, the constitutional monarchs have, even if they don't have any real legal authority, they may still have soft power to influence the politicians. But that's not the way it should be. I mean, the fact is that she was invested with a job. Um, that is, she is supposed to protect the realm and to govern it. And the fact that she is essentially unable, and I'm not even sure really willing to do that, is really the problem here. I mean, that's the problem for Britain, is the fact that the very people who are supposed to be able to effectively preserve the kingdom and prevent it from falling into the hands of the sort of people who are running our country, they're not she's not doing that job. And I'm not saying that if I was in her position, if it's that I'm inheriting a throne after centuries of the monarch essentially being a sideshow, that I wouldn't be in that I wouldn't essentially feel like her, that if I rocked the boat, that I would be out of a job and I would be deposed. But so it's
Throw
easy
in
for
the
me to say what she should do. Essentially, it's easy for me to say what she should do, even though I'm not. Even though if I was in her position, I might be doing the exact same thing. But that still doesn't.
the other point the CBS special made was that there's speculation that when it's time for, say, William to take over, then the monarchy will look more like a European monarchy with a lot less pomp and circumstance than there is now. A lot
Which,
less ceremony attached, etc.
well, I mean, the thing with that is that I like the pomp and circumstance, I like the ceremony, I like the song "Pomp and Circumstance," which is actually "Land of Hope and Glory," but nobody knows the lyrics, so we just know the tune. Da, da,
Land
da,
of
da,
hope
da,
and
da, da.
glory,
Anyways, nobody knows the actual lyrics. Well, I do, but
love
anyway.
free.
Anyways,
Shall we extol ye,
okay,
who were born of ye?
okay.
Well,
Well, okay. We don't need to go into that again. But um, yeah. So I mean, and remember, we did make the promise that two people wouldn't be singing on the show at once. But anyways, no, I mean the
You
thing we
weren't
had to
singing, you were doing
the
da
tune.
da da da.
Yeah, I know, but anyways, my point is, um, the pomp and circumstance. I like the pomp and circumstance. I like all that, but the fact remains is that it doesn't represent anything anymore. I mean, all these. The only thing the only visible thing, item, action actually, that is representative of the situation is when the Queen's representative or whatever goes to Parliament, she has to the representative he has to knock on the door and ask to be let in. Okay, that represents something. Okay, that represents that the monarchy is practically a sideshow and is playing second fiddle to the Parliament. The fact that the Queen can't just go into essentially her own building because all the land is really hers and say, "Okay, boys, what's on the agenda today?" She has to ask to be let in. Shows that the monarchy is essentially just a pawn, as it were, that's left there for for convenience sake. Because Britons feel an attachment, and they should feel an attachment to their monarchy, but it's it's just there for show. And so all these traditions dying away with Prince Charles or William or whoever else, it's sad. But as long as the monarchy is effectively just a shell, then there's no point. I mean, these traditions are nice and all, but they came around because there was a point, and they were supposed to represent something. But if the situation that those traditions represent aren't there anymore, what's the point of keeping them around?
And so
And of course, why, like, does she actually have to ask to go into Parliament?
I mean, I'm sure if she strolled in, nobody would actually make a fuss. But I technically, when she opened, I think it's when they're opening Parliament or whatever, or her representative will knock on the door, and then somebody will let her in, as if she wasn't above them, as if she wasn't above them all on the hierarchy.
but
I think it's just I think it could just be a symbol of politeness instead of just barging the door open and announcing her presence.
Well, okay, it could be, but and admittedly I don't know myself, but knowing everything that you know about um
Oh, the
knowing
monarch is banned from the lower chambers, so yes, he actually does have to get permission.
and that's the thing. Okay, the House of Commons. Okay, the lower chambers, the House of Commons, I think.
Yes.
Why she is the queen. Okay, she's above them. She is their queen. Okay, she should have. Okay, I'm not saying that the queen should just start going around London and barging into people's apartments. You know, but technically, I mean, obviously that would kind of. Whether she has the right or not, that would be rude just to go and randomly walking into people's homes unannounced.
all of,
But
if I
Well,
may,
it
back to
would be it would be a rather excellent scene to watch Elizabeth II barge into the offices of the honorable representative from Liverpool's North District or whatever it's called.
Oi, vey, why there's so many stabbings in here, I say. You're making a mockery of my police force. Anyway,
Well, of course, if the Queen actually showed her face in Liverpool, I would be very shocked because the whole city of Liverpool is essentially the UK's version of Portland, if we wanna be polite about it.
their libs.
They're even more than libs. Some people in Liverpool that are active politically are out and out socialists.
But
which is uh,
okay,
which
all of
is
this garbage, all this procedure about needing to ask Parliament's permission to go in goes back to the restoration of Charles II, because after he who shall not be named proved to be a great and horrific failure and almost destroyed Britain, They reinstated the monarchy in order to give Parliament legitimacy instead of, apologizing, rebuking, and
Cromwell. Oh,
get
I said the name.
announcing he who shall not be named, and what's the word I'm looking for? Pardoning King Charles I, recognizing their mistake.
Well, they didn't have the authority to pardon him, just like they didn't have the authority to condemn him to death. They should have been, my
To try
bad.
him in the first place.
Well, yeah, they didn't have the authority to try to trial him and to sentence him to trial in the first place. No, they should have basically said, Charles II, would you please come back? We done messed up. Uh, and if you want to smack us, that's fine. We deserve it.
Well, if you want to learn more about our feelings on the trial of King Charles I, we did an episode where we talked about it at length. So we will refer you back to that.
And
I
for
think
those,
it's called Jacobite time. Jacobite time.
and those of you who didn't know who I was referring to, I was of course referring to Oliver Cromwell.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, but actually, though, he died, and then his son took over, but he was kind of incompetent. I don't know all the details myself, but apparently he broke Rule 1, which is keep the army happy.
Dictator overthrew the monarchy, and what does he do? He establishes hereditary succession. The irony.
It totally wasn't a king, guys. It was
Lord Protector.
yeah. It totally wasn't a monarchy, even though it's a hereditary office passed to my son. Even though it has no legitimacy whatsoever.
Cromwell had, even if you want to, excuse me, take the Jacobite position, Queen Elizabeth II has more legitimacy than Oliver Cromwell ever imagined that he did.
Oliver Cromwell has no legitimacy. That's the point. Basically, what Oliver Cromwell did was basically the same thing as what Julius Caesar tried to pull in Rome. The only difference is that Rome was a republic at the time, so it actually worked. Rome didn't have a legitimate monarch.
And at least Caesar was like from one of the big respected families of Rome, as opposed to, just
At least Caesar was actually a good leader, good at his job.
Welcome back to the studio there, Darth. It's been a while.
oof.
Anyway, I believe we have exhausted this. I think
Well,
we're veering into ground we've already covered.
well, yeah, but it's always fun to retread. I mean, no, I mean, every time Queen Elizabeth gets brought up, I know I always go on this exact tirade, but uh, at the same time, there are positive. I mean, it is interesting to see how Queen Elizabeth's reign, how everything happened, because she inherits the throne in 52. Britain's already undergone a lot of problems. Uh, I mean, BR was nationalized into, well, all British railways were nationalized into British Railways, which eventually got shortened to British Rail, but never mind. And then the coal mines and all that were nationalized. I think that was in 48 and 49. Or 48 or 49. But anyways, because labor took over. LABOUR. They took over the joint. Huh?
And then Margaret Thatcher unnationalized them and ended up wrecking the British economic competitiveness in the process.
Well, I mean, here's the thing with British
And with
Rail.
yeah, and with Thatcher, you can sort of see why the people of Liverpool hate the monarchy
No,
as a whole, because
False.
Margaret Thatcher, according to the people in Liverpool, wanted to burn the city to the ground or whatnot.
Well, that's not the monarchy's fault. That's the
No,
Tories' fault. They can't blame the Tories for screwing up. They can't blame the monarchy for screwing up Britain.
no,
Well, that's the Tories.
no. I mean, here's.
So the
I'm sorry
Tories
for.
always mess up with
Huh?
The Tories what, Darth?
the Tories always mess up Britain, so that's just normal for them.
Well, no. I mean, well, Margaret Thatcher and British Rail specifically. What we call it the privatization of British Rail. What actually kind of happened is everything was ruled by this. I think here's my understanding. It's a government-run corporation called Network Rail, and it leases certain routes or whatever out to to certain operating companies, oftentimes taking the names of previous companies like the London and Northeastern or the Great Western, even though they have no relation to the actual, Great Western or whatever. Um, but the but because of how the law works, not they're essentially, I guess, renting the lines or whatever, but they also are renting the rolling stock, and it's this entire convoluted mess where it's not effectively we call it the privatization of British Rail, but all what really happened is essentially a government corporation leases the lines, but then there's all this red tape, and so effectively it's a massive mess. And I don't know. I mean, but British Rail was already terrible. I mean, it was a joke. Like there was, I don't know what show it was, but there was this comedy sketch where it's this guy says, British Rail has announced that it intends to maintain its standards. And now for the good news. I mean, it was. I mean, it was.
I mean, technically, everybody's always paying rent. Everybody's leasing from the Queen. So
Yeah, but I mean, this is just the most. I mean, what should have happened? What should have happened? What should have happened? I don't know if this was the only way Margaret Thatcher could have realistically have done it, or what. Maybe she had to compromise with Labor or whatever, who came up with this, and this is how this stupid system came into being. But what should have happened was uh maybe the people who used to own the railways before the merger of 23, when all the private railway companies were merged into four larger companies forcibly, even though they were still able to run themselves and the government wasn't interfering as much before 48, if I understand correctly. But what should have happened is they should have found, I guess, the descendants of the people who originally owned those pre 23 lines, said, hey, do you mind if we here have these or whatever, and given them back to the people who they merged them from, or find or auction them, or auction the lines off, or something. You just either have it be fully nationalized and fully run by the government, or have it be run in private hands. Okay, the British Rails network was working fine until pre 23. They just wanted it merged together, I think, because in the event of a war, it would have made it easier for logistics or whatnot. Either fully have it privatized or fully have it nationalized. Don't do this stupid halfway house they've been doing since the 80s or 90s or whatever. That's an absolute nightmare. I'm
And I
sorry.
think,
If something goes wrong, in the track, there shouldn't be this massive investigation to figure out which company should do it. If something goes wrong on a certain section of track that's owned by a company and it was that company's locomotive, it should just be the company. Just uh,
I think that they also want to do a halfway house type thing with their National Health Service. I don't know all the details of that. My knowledge of modern UK politics is, shall we say, not very good.
oh, please
But
don't do it in a halfway house like we have over here.
but of course, we would like to also extend our congratulations to Real Madrid on winning the UEFA Champions League. A little bit of history there. Real Madrid is named such because they got permission to be a royal thing and to use the crown on their logo from the King of Spain. The King of Spain was in attendance in Paris at the UEFA Champions League final last Saturday, at the time of recording, of course. And Real Madrid defeated Liverpool FC in that competition, in that final, which is kind of why I decided to bring Liverpool up earlier on in the show. And this week, this is just a little anecdote. Real Madrid offered their Champions League trophy to Our Lady at the cathedral in Madrid
Ooh, that's
as
nice.
a way of thanking her for that particular victory. So anyway, that was just a brief aside. Let's get back to the topic at hand here.
Yeah. Sorry to make a long story short. Don't Government bureaucracy is bad enough. Don't try to put in. Don't try to have government bureaucracy and then try to introduce private not meddling, but private operation into it, and then force that private operation to have a whole lot of bureaucracy itself. Because you're just look. I mean, I love paperwork as much as okay, I don't, but I love a bureaucratic nightmare as much as the next guy. But I love it when I'm reading about a fictitious bureaucratic nightmare. I don't actually want to live in a state where we actually have to put up with all that. Ugh.
Hey, this is why if you nationalize anything, it should be under the crown, not the stupid civilian government, because you always see civilian governments mess it up by making it too bureaucratic, too complicated for the average intelligible human to even understand. Like, look at our tax code, for instance. Like civilian government's awful, guys. We return to tradition. Nationalize the means of production underneath the monarchy.
Yeah,
Um,
local nobles running the estates.
The big
yeah,
I think should be nationalized in the U.S. is utilities. Utility companies should be nationalized.
I mean,
Water
effective.
yeah,
nationalized, electricity should be nationalized, and why production of natural gas and fossil fuels doesn't necessarily need to be nationalized. The transportation of such goods, such as in the pipelines and stuff, should be.
I
Now, would
mean,
you consider the internet a utility?
In this day and age, I probably would. That's South Korea did that. They had all the internet be um, uh, nationalized, and they have the highest, most efficient internet in the world. But that's also because they had a central plan to make their entire internet infrastructure.
And beating around the bush, because the U.S. does this too with Amtrak, where it's both a private company but it's also owned by the government. Let's just nationalize passenger railway, do what every other Western country has done, and made it so passenger rails have right of way regardless, and let's start rebuilding the railway.
well, okay. Well, here's my thing with Amtrak. Um, Union Pacific or BNCF or whichever railway company is operating there, it's their track. I don't. I mean, I'm not saying Amtrak shouldn't be allowed to go out and build its own track, but I don't think that we should, given that was it freight passenger. Okay, I can't talk. Okay,
I
pure
believe
passenger service. Huh?
I
Oh,
believe
sorry.
that I believe that freight and passenger service have to use the same track if
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. I mean, but since it's BNCF's or Union Pacific's or is Norfolk and Southern still a thing? Norfolk and Southern's track. I don't see a problem with having Amtrak wait because I mean that's the agreement. And I mean historically, the only thing that made passenger services profitable, at least from my understanding, was the mail contracts that the U.S. Postal Service had. But of course, the U.S. Postal Service is going by road or by air now. So that's why passenger services died in the first place. It was because they weren't profitable. And then there are certain lines that are, but by and large, no. And most of the U.S. rail system now, all that's left of it is either heritage. Well, heritage. Most of the passenger. Well, whatever. Hold on. Most of the track is being used for moving freight and moving goods. And as much as I love railroads and I would love the dream of being able to hop on and go anywhere in the US by fast, efficient rail,
Well,
look,
you're not imagining things well enough. If the reason the US stopped having good passenger rails is because we shifted so much to an automobile centric society. Europe didn't do that, and that's why they still have successful and profitable passenger rails. The problem isn't with rail, the problem is with how we've designed our infrastructure. And the way we design our infrastructure is actually losing money in itself because our overly decentralized infrastructure is expensive to maintain and can't carry goods in massive enough quantities efficiently.
what if you wanted to take the tram in your city, but GM said drive?
They ruined American cities and they shipped all of our jobs overseas. I'm loyal to the only true American car brand, Honda.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Made in Marysville, Ohio. Ford doesn't make cars in America. GM doesn't make cars in America. No, it takes Japanese car companies to actually make cars in America.
And that
Toyota does
is
the
to
exact same
me,
thing.
And
uh,
then I guess also Tesla, but who
and
wants
that
to
to
drive an electric
me
car?
is an indictment on the American car manufacturers for allowing the Japanese companies to swoop in and take empty factories. Go ahead, Darth.
Well, I was just saying, like, Toyota does that too, and that's why I'm also pretty brand loyal to Toyota. Also, they're very reliable cars. Unlike American cars that are designed to break down after 30,000 miles or need some maintenance.
Yeah.
Japanese cars, like I had a Camry that I drove for 500,000 miles, never had any issues,
Civic,
and
up. Civic gang, where are you at?
I, you know,
doesn't what?
I drive a Civic, a Honda Civic.
Oh,
okay.
I have no.
I oh sorry. I know that Will and I always have our Ohio Michigan rivalry thing, but at the very least, I'm sure you will concede that Michigan is at least slightly better in the fact that we have the highest percentage of made in America cars registered here. Like I think it's in the 70s or 80s.
Which is petty theft.
Yeah, that was great when the car factories were actually in Michigan. Now it's basically just a hollowed out reminder that your state actually used to be important and worth something.
Hey, we have Jiffy the box things. They're like little. You add water or put them in the oven, and you uh they're like little boxes. They're blue. Here, hold on. I'll put it. Obviously, our audience and YouTube isn't going to be able to
Think you Jiffy Pop?
no. Like they're mix. Like they're mixes of like these different like corn mix or they're little boxes that you can get in the store, and then you add water or whatever in them, and then you bake them. It's essentially a way of
It's a boxed meal. That's not. It's corn muffin mix.
they also have
Talking about. Are you
they all
peak of Michigan civilization is cornmeal?
well we also have burners.
We have Buckeyes. Balls
Well
of peanut butter dipped in chocolate.
What?
On my level.
We have murders. We have shoot. What else do we have? We have
Rocket science for you if you can only name one good food thing from Michigan, Charles.
Well, no. We also there's this brand of tortilla chip salsa or whatever that's from here. Let's see. We have
Tostitos?
My hometown is the popcorn capital of the world. Get on my level, scrub.
I'm physically above. Anyways, let's see. What else does Michigan have? Let's see. I
You,
got to remember Michigan Fun Food Friday.
uh,
From Michigan history class. Let's see. We have boxed water.
your water's so polluted you can't drink it. Our water's so polluted we can set it on fire. Get on.
But we have a Coca-Cola bottle. I'm sure a lot of places have this, but we have a Coca-Cola bottling plant. One of which was by a historically black parish. Anyways,
We have an Anheuser-Busch plant. We have beer. That's better than Coke.
everyone has beers, but Michigan has more local microbreweries than probably everywhere except Germany. Let's see. We have. Oh, speaking of, we have Frankenmuth in Germany. We
Frankenmuth
have.
in Germany.
Well, I mean, we have Frankenmuth in Michigan, which is like it was settled by a bunch of Bavarians, which was great, but it was settled by the Lutheran ones, which is not so great.
Astronauts than
Those
any.
Frankfurters.
Probably.
Frankfurters are the Lutheran Bavarians, and let's just say we don't always get along with the Southern true Bavarians that are Catholic. I mean, they don't.
All right, let us.
Well,
Now that
let's
we
see.
are off of the Michigan fun, now that we are done with Michigan fun time, shall we move on to our last topic, which I think is actually going to be a fun one?
Nobody has any objections.
Going once, going twice.
Sold to the
Sold.
man who drives the 50,000-mile
Sold
car.
to William Stout. William Stout, you have wanted to talk about this topic for the past few weeks. Go ahead and go.
Alright. Now, I'm not a smoking man. But if I did smoke, I would have a pack out right now because we have a pack watch going on. And it's for one Miss Amber Heard. R.I.P. Rest in P.
Don't do that.
Okay, yeah, you could cut that out. Anyway, Johnny
You know how much of your stuff I've had to cut out this episode?
Depp had to cut out that much.
You're saying gosh, but not gosh. Anyways, pray continue.
Johnny Depp not only has been found innocent by the jury, but his countersuit for defamation has also been found in favor by the jury. And one Miss Amber Heard now has a negative $6 million net worth. A victory
Oh,
for
she's
victims
gonna
of
have to start up that OnlyFans soon.
a victory for male victims of domestic abuse everywhere. Hear, hear, boys.
You know,
All right.
you can remember this is the day you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow to
The
steal
meme
the line from
is
Joe. Who
great. I know this shouldn't be a joking matter, but the trial was so comedic. The defense Amber Heard and her lawyer put up so poor, it made the Rittenhouse trial look well conducted.
I didn't watch any of this
And
trial.
also the Chauvin trial was better done than this trial.
The point is, they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. It was horrific.
Are we going to get Pirates of the Caribbean 6? Pardon me. I mean, we gotta have a full.
Johnny Depp isn't coming back. Supposedly they're getting Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to play it. In which case, I will not be watching it.
What you can't get.
Well, because Disney is the Me Too company, so they believe all women, even if it's Amber Heard.
I,
And
okay. I don't like Disney, and I probably wouldn't spend money on seeing the movie, on seeing Pirates 6 anyways. But still, you can't replace Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow. I mean, he's too iconic. That'd be like I have a Lego Jack Sparrow right here because I missed it when I needed to take most of my Lego sets downstairs in the basement for storage. But
And a lot of people have been talking about that now too. Will Johnny Depp sue Disney for royalties because they'll continue to use his likeness in Disney parks and Disney merchandise because he's Captain Jack Sparrow?
He
And of
could.
I
course,
mean,
the
I mean,
ultimate,
I don't know how
of
is it
course,
using
the
that
ultimate
likeness if it's
irony, of
under all
course,
that makeup.
that the ultimate irony, of course, is that Johnny Depp was cast to play one of the characters in this Harry Potter film that just came out. He got pulled from that because of this lawsuit.
Oh
And the
yeah,
movies,
wasn't he the main villain in the original Fantastic Beasts before they retroactively made Dumbledore gay for some reason?
oh, no. Okay, the timeline is Dumbledore was made gay by Rowling after Deathly Hallows came out in, I believe, '08. And Johnny Depp was slated to play Grindelwald in the Fantastic Beasts movies. He played him in Fantastic Beasts 1 and 2, I think. Fantastic Beasts 3, he was replaced.
Um, okay. With a name like that, he's evil. So,
Well,
uh,
also, why the name Grindelwald? That's like a bastardization of German surname there. And I
Don't
don't know.
blame the movie. Blame J.K. Rowling for naming him.
Well,
is it rolling or
well, yeah.
rowling?
Who knows? I'm rolling, rowling, and everybody says either or.
Yeah, it's
So
either.
I'm just gonna say the turf woman.
I thought she was Scottish.
Well, no,
Yeah, she
she's a
is.
turf. That means she's a like first wave feminist type or second wave,
Oh,
whatever.
you said turf. I thought you called her a Turk.
All right. So Johnny Depp won his suit. Now, do you think that this? Now, Amber Heard released a statement that I thought was very, shall we say, caustic and inflammatory, because
Well,
she,
it's all
We can't hear anything you're saying.
okay. So I'm going to just say that Miss Heard has placed herself as the standard bearer for all women who are victims of domestic assault.
The
yeah.
abuser.
What a banner to have.
Will, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I said she is the abuser. She can't do that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Yes, I
hear you.
can hear you now.
But yeah, how could she do that? She was the abuser. She has no right to do that. She has no moral high ground to stand on. How can she claim a moral high ground?
I mean, um, believe all women.
No.
But
Uh,
but 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 but, but,
well,
but what,
just
who
as
are
an
you gonna believe? Who are you gonna believe? Me or your own eyes?
The evidence.
just as an just as a quick
Evidence.
just on a quick serious note here, if you are legitimately a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence in any way, if you legitimately are one, I pray that you are not in Seattle because the Seattle Police Department have announced they are not taking any new cases of that.
They're what?
I wish I was joking.
Why not?
Apparently, there's a massive backlog they have to get through.
And that makes it all right to delay.
Okay.
I mean, I understand a massive backlog of cases, but still, that doesn't. If it's legitimate domestic abuse, then like you kind of need to get on the ball there.
I think that it was more along the lines of rape.
They're not doing. They're not taking it. Why?
How is any of this okay?
Unless the police department's like two
modern
guys and a. Okay, it probably is, but
Oh, well, that just ruined my evening, and I am still not able to deal with that.
All right, and well, actually, on the actual serious note here, if you are a victim of sexual abuse, rape, or domestic violence, please visit the website of the organization called RAIN. That is the word RAIN with a second N in there, RAINN.org. And they can connect you with resources that will help you find assistance in your particular situation. And this type of stuff should not happen to anyone, which is exactly why Miss Heard damaged the credibility of real victims of domestic abuse and sexual assault because she has been proven to have lied about being abused by Johnny Depp. So if you actually have been abused, first of all, we believe you, and please seek help through your local domestic abuse shelter by going to rain at RAINN.org, and please get the help that you need. Thank you for listening to this public service announcement from Monarchist America and Monarchist Minute. I think on that note, Charles, we should probably close.
I don't know. I mean, we can let Darth say some things about this and such.
Is my mic working now?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I don't really have much to add on the Amber Heard. I just think, well, one, she had it coming.
All right. So, Will, are you ready to wrap up?
Yes, our last topic today,
Oh,
well,
yeah. We gotta do D-Day. Talk about D-Day.
yeah. When this video releases on Monday, it will be the anniversary of Operation Overlord, and every year I take a personal effort out of my life to sit down and remember those souls who stormed that beach that wet, cool morning in early June to liberate Europe from the Third Reich. And I would appreciate it if all of you did so as well.
You know, whether or not America, whether or not we were, we were a good thing or not. I mean, obviously, I think we were better than the Nazis. At least I hope we are. Um, I mean, the fact remains is that when it comes to any sort of battle like that, whether it's the storming the beaches of Normandy or Verdun or Waterloo or whatever, where you have these sorts of I guess heroic and romantic charges, um, it makes you think. Boy, I probably couldn't do that, and hopefully You know, if we ever do find ourselves in that position, we will be able to, do that. Be the sort of person who can say, "Well, I didn't expect to be in a command position, but I'm the highest ranking guy left, so I guess I'm in charge now. I guess I'm the commander now." Or we landed on the wrong beach. Well,
That
let's just start the war from right here. You know.
that actually happened in World War II, where everyone in a company was killed except for I think it was a private first class. So because they didn't have any officers to slot in, they just promoted him to captain and then filled in his company. Like this private went to captain in it.
We don't need an officer school. You don't have to go through officer training if all your officers are out of combat. Um, Actually, that
Okay.
is sort of similar to kind of similar to a sci-fi book I'm reading right now with my dad, where a lot of the senior NC they have this thing called rejuvenation, where effectively you're put back to your 20s or 30s or whatever with drugs. It's kind of cringe, but there's a problem with the drugs, so a lot of the senior NCOs are out. So lieutenants, or at least one lieutenant, has been given command of a warship. I mean, it's a small picket ship, but still, I mean, you know, uh, yeah.
Well, I'm going to step in here with permission and plug the social medias.
Well, I guess so.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have enjoyed this podcast tonight, please check out our social medias, including our Twitter, Facebook, Gab, and the granddaddy of them all, our Discord server. If you didn't know from our YouTube audience, we record our podcast on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, live in our Discord server. Link to the Discord server, along with the rest of our social medias, will be in the description down below, as well as a link to the Darth Kilhoon YouTube channel. Darth Kilhoon, you have a video coming out tomorrow, do you not?
Yeah, yeah. It's the funeral of Kaiser Wilhelm II, which was on June. Okay, actually, never mind. I don't know the exact day of the funeral, but I know he died on June the 4th, 1941, which just makes 71 years without our great Kaiser. A shame. He was one of the few active resistors against the National Socialist regime, and at the time period, same with most of the German royalty of all the different houses, they pretty much uniformly opposed Adolf. And the Kaiser would never refer to him as the German Führer. He'd refer him as the Austrian corporal every time he mentioned him, just to demean him.
Uh, that's a sick burn.
And also,
You.
Hitler couldn't touch the Kaiser, like kill him, but he did intern him in under house arrest towards the end of his life. So he died alone, pretty much under the watch of SS guards, which was sad.
All right,
Well,
so
now it's
that was the plug for Darth Kilhoon's new show on YouTube, he will have that out for you by the time you watch this video on YouTube, because we upload on Monday.
and
And we would
now
like to and we would like to wish our all of our Christian viewers a very blessed Pentecost Sunday. Pentecost marks the anniversary of the Holy Spirit descending upon the apostles, thereby, according to the Catholic Church, kickstarting the Catholic Church throughout the world. This is the Church's
Well,
birthday.
also the Orthodox are still in that tradition too. So the
Right.
Orthodox as well.
because they have valid apostolic succession, unlike other churches I could mention,
Anyway, let us
Anglicans. All
and
right, now it's time to conclude in prayer, and we'll do an extra prayer for today for obvious reasons. All right.
Right.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day
This
our
day
daily
our
bread,
daily
and forgive
bread,
us
and
our
forgive us
trespasses.
our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
And for all the servicemen who have died over the years. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let the perpetual light shine upon them.
May those souls and the souls of all faithful departed, for the mercy of God, rest in peace.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Until next week, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.